The telegram trembled in Katherine's gloved hands as the train screeched to a halt at Green River, Wyoming, and she wondered if stepping off onto that dusty platform would be the biggest mistake of her life, or her only chance at salvation. Steam hissed around her ankles as Katherine Foster descended the iron steps, her worn carpetbag clutched so tightly her knuckles showed white through her thin gloves. September of 1882 had brought an unusual chill to the high desert, and she shivered despite the afternoon sun beating down on the wooden platform. Her dark blue traveling dress, the finest thing she owned, was rumpled from 3 days of constant movement, first by steamboat down the Mississippi, then by rail across half the continent. The corset beneath pinched her ribs with each shallow breath she managed to draw. Green River stretched before her like something from a fever dream. Dust devils danced between weathered buildings that looked like they might blow away in a strong wind. The main street was rutted and dry, flanked by establishments whose painted signs were already peeling under the relentless Wyoming sun. Beyond the town, sagebrush-covered hills rolled toward distant mountains that pierced the enormous sky. Everything felt too big, too open, too far from the cramped Philadelphia streets where she had grown up. Katherine's stomach twisted as she scanned the handful of people on the platform. Which one was Harrison Nichols? The man who had written her 4 carefully worded letters over the past 3 months. The rancher seeking a wife to help build a life in this unforgiving territory. She had memorized every line of those letters, searching for clues about the man behind the neat handwriting. He had described his land, his cattle, his aspirations to build something lasting. But he had said precious little about himself beyond the basics. 32 years old, unmarried, originally from Missouri. A group of cowboys loitered near the freight office, their eyes tracking her movement with unabashed curiosity. An older woman in a faded calico dress stood with a basket of eggs, watching the train's arrival with bored familiarity. 2 men in suits conversed near a buckboard wagon, neither sparing her a glance. None of them approached her. None of them looked like they were expecting someone. Katherine's heart hammered against her ribcage. What if he had changed his mind? What if he took one look at her plain face and brown hair and decided she was not worth the trouble? She had no money for a return ticket. She had exactly $3.75 to her name, barely enough to last a week in a boarding house, if Green River even had such an establishment. The platform began to clear as other passengers collected their belongings and dispersed into town, or were met by waiting family members. The conductor called out the 10-minute warning before the train would continue its journey westward. Katherine stood frozen, her legs refusing to cooperate with her mind's frantic commands to do something, anything. "Miss Foster," the voice came from behind her, deep and slightly rough, like gravel sliding over stone. Katherine spun around so quickly her carpetbag swung wide, nearly throwing her off balance. She had been so focused on the platform ahead that she had not noticed the man who must have been standing near the depot building. Harrison Nichols was taller than she had imagined, probably 6 feet or more, with shoulders broad enough to strain the fabric of his dark shirt. He wore work-worn denim trousers, scuffed leather boots, and a wide-brimmed hat that cast shadows across a face weathered by sun and wind. His jaw was strong, covered by a neatly trimmed beard a shade darker than his light brown hair. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Gray-blue like the sky before a storm, studying her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously examined and somehow protected. "Yes," she managed, her voice emerging as barely more than a whisper. "Mr. Nichols," he nodded once, a sharp dip of his chin. "I apologize for not meeting you as you stepped down. I wanted to give you a moment to get your bearings before introducing myself." His gaze flickered over her face, taking in details she suddenly wished she could hide. The dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights on hard train seats, the worry lines creasing her forehead, the way her whole body trembled like a leaf in autumn wind. "I appreciate that," Katherine said, though in truth she felt no appreciation, only terror mixed with exhaustion and the peculiar disappointment that comes from realizing something long anticipated has finally arrived. And now, there was no going back. Harrison stepped closer and Katherine flinched involuntarily. She tried to cover it by adjusting her grip on her bag, but his eyes narrowed slightly, missing nothing. When he spoke again, his voice had softened, losing some of its gravel quality. "You're safe now," he said, and something in those three simple words made Katherine's vision blur with unexpected tears. She blinked them back furiously, humiliated. She had promised herself she would not cry, would not show weakness, would not reveal the desperate circumstances that had driven her to answer a mail-order bride advertisement in the first place. "Thank you," she whispered. "I am fine, just tired from the journey." Harrison did not look convinced, but he did not press. Instead, he reached for her carpet bag. "May I?" She hesitated, then surrendered it. The bag was not heavy, containing only 2 changes of clothes, a hairbrush, her mother's Bible, and the few precious items she had managed to keep when her world fell apart 6 months ago. Yet Harrison lifted it as though it weighed nothing. "My wagon is just there," he said, gesturing toward a sturdy-looking vehicle pulled by 2 horses, one chestnut and one black. "It is about an hour's ride to the ranch. We can get supplies first if you need anything, or head straight out if you would prefer. Whatever makes you comfortable." The consideration in his voice surprised her. Katherine had expected many things from this arrangement: awkwardness, disappointment, perhaps even regret on both sides. She had not expected thoughtfulness. It made something tight in her chest loosen just slightly. "Straight to the ranch would be fine," she said. The thought of walking through town, being stared at by curious strangers feeling their judgment, made her stomach churn. "Unless you need supplies." "I stocked up yesterday in anticipation of your arrival," Harrison said. He had turned slightly, leading her toward the wagon, and she noticed he kept his pace measured, not forcing her to rush despite her shorter legs. "I figured you would want time to settle in rather than traipse through town after 3 days on the train." They reached the wagon, and Harrison set her carpet bag in the back alongside sacks of flour and cornmeal, coils of rope, and various other ranch necessities. He turned to help her up, offering his hand. Katherine stared at it for a moment. Large, calloused, the hand of a man who worked hard for his living. She placed her smaller hand in his, and his fingers closed around hers with surprising gentleness. The contact sent a jolt through her, not of fear but of something else entirely, something she could not name. Harrison's hand was warm and solid, and when he helped her up onto the wagon seat, supporting her weight effortlessly, Katherine felt safer than she had in months. He released her hand as soon as she was seated and walked around to the other side, climbing up with practiced ease. The wagon dipped under his weight, bringing him close enough that Katherine could smell leather and sage and something clean, like soap. He gathered the reins, clicked his tongue softly to the horses, and they began to move. Green River fell away behind them surprisingly quickly. Within minutes, they had left the last weathered buildings behind and were traveling through open country, following a rutted road that cut through sagebrush and sparse grass. The sky stretched overhead, impossibly vast and blue, marked only by a few wispy clouds on the far horizon. Katherine had never seen so much space, so much emptiness. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. They rode in silence for several minutes. Katherine searched for something to say, some way to begin the conversation that would determine the shape of her entire future, but her mind remained stubbornly blank. Every potential opening seemed inadequate or foolish. Harrison broke the silence first. "I hope the journey was not too difficult," he said, keeping his eyes on the road ahead. "It was long," Katherine admitted, "but not terrible. The train was mostly on time and the weather held fair." "Good." Another pause then. "I want you to know that I mean what I said in my letters. I am looking for a partner, not a servant. The work is hard out here and I will not pretend otherwise, but we will work together, and whatever we build as equals." Katherine studied his profile, trying to reconcile the man beside her with the words in those careful letters. "That is not how most men view marriage," she said cautiously. "I am not most men," Harrison replied. His jaw tightened briefly. "My mother ran a farm mostly by herself after my father died when I was 12. She taught me that women are just as capable as men, just as strong when circumstances demand it, sometimes stronger." He glanced at her then, those storm-colored eyes meeting hers directly. "I saw in your letters that you lost your parents. I am sorry for that." The sympathy in his voice was genuine, and it made Katherine's throat tighten. She had learned over the past 6 months that most people did not know what to say about loss, so they said nothing at all or mouthed empty platitudes. Harrison's simple acknowledgement felt like the first honest reaction she had received. "Thank you," she managed. "It has been difficult. I imagine it has." Harrison returned his attention to the road as they crested a small rise. "I lost my own mother 3 years ago. My father back in '68 during the tail end of the war. Not in battle, just sickness, but it killed him just as sure." "I am sorry," Katherine said quietly. Something in her chest eased further. He understood loss. He knew what it meant to have the foundation of your life torn away. The landscape began to change gradually as they traveled. The flat stretches gave way to gentle rolling hills. More trees appeared, cottonwoods mostly, clustered near creek beds. The grass grew thicker, greener in places. Katherine spotted cattle in the distance, red and white shapes scattered across a hillside like spilled toys. "Those are mine," Harrison said, noticing her gaze. "Or ours, I suppose I should say now. I have about 200 head at present. Not a large operation compared to some of the big ranches, but it is growing steady. The land is good here, plenty of water from the creek that runs through the property." "How long have you been ranching?" Katherine asked, genuinely curious now despite her anxiety. "I've had this land for 5 years," Harrison said. "Worked as a ranch hand for 3 years before that, saving everything I could. Bought the property from a man who wanted to head back east after his wife died. He thought the land killed her, but it was just pneumonia. Could have happened anywhere." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I have been building slowly, doing most of the work myself. I have one hired hand who comes out during busy seasons, but mostly it is just me. That is part of why I wanted a wife. The work is too much for one person, and I am tired of being alone." The honesty of that last statement surprised Katherine. Men in her experience did not admit to loneliness. They covered it with bluster or drink or anger. Harrison simply stated it as a fact, like saying the sky was blue or the grass was green. "I understand loneliness," Katherine said softly. "After her parents died, after the creditors took the house, after her supposed friends disappeared when she could no longer maintain the pretense of respectability, she had learned exactly how crushing loneliness could be." Harrison glanced at her again, and something passed between them in that look, a recognition perhaps, or the first thread of understanding. "Then we have that in common at least," he said. They rode on, and gradually Katherine felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease. The rhythmic creaking of the wagon, the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves, the warmth of the afternoon sun all combined to create an almost hypnotic effect. She had not slept properly in days, and exhaustion pulled at her like weights tied to her limbs. "You can lean against me if you need to rest," Harrison said quietly. "It is still another 40 minutes to the ranch, and you look about ready to fall over." Katherine wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain her dignity and independence, but her body had other ideas. Almost without conscious decision, she found herself swaying slightly toward him. Harrison shifted the reins to one hand and carefully placed his arm behind her back, not quite touching but there if she needed the support. Slowly, her head drooped toward his shoulder. She caught herself twice, jerking upright, but the third time Harrison said, "It is all right. I do not mind." So she let herself lean just a little and closed her eyes against the bright afternoon light. She must have dozed because the next thing she knew, the wagon was stopping and Harrison was saying her name gently. "Miss Foster, Katherine, we are home." Katherine straightened quickly, momentarily disoriented. The sun had moved lower in the sky, painting everything in warmer tones. They had stopped in front of a house, and Katherine blinked at it in surprise. From Harrison's letters, she had expected something small and rough, maybe little more than a cabin. Instead, she saw a proper house, single-story but well-built, with a porch running across the front and real glass windows reflecting the afternoon light. The wood siding was weathered but solid, the roof newly shingled. To one side stood a barn, larger than the house, and beyond that several smaller outbuildings. A chicken coop, a smokehouse, what looked like a workshop. "You built all this yourself?" Katherine asked, unable to keep the amazement from her voice. "Most of it," Harrison said, and was that a note of pride in his voice? "Had help with the barn raising, of course. But the house, yes, that was me. Took the better part of 2 years, working on it between everything else." He climbed down from the wagon and came around to her side, offering his hand again. "It is not fancy, but it is solid. Built to last." Katherine let him help her down, her legs stiff from the ride. Standing in the yard, she turned slowly, taking in her new home. The setting sun turned the distant mountains purple and gold. A creek glittered in the middle distance, lined with cottonwoods. The air smelled clean, sharp with sage and the green scent of grass. It was nothing like Philadelphia, nothing like any place she had ever been. "It is beautiful," she said, and meant it. Harrison looked pleased, though he tried to hide it. "Come inside," he said. "I will get your bag in a minute. Let me show you the house first." He led her up 3 steps onto the porch. Katherine noticed the wood was smooth, carefully planed and sanded, no splinters or rough edges. Harrison opened the door and gestured for her to enter first. The interior was dim after the bright sunshine, and Katherine paused just inside the doorway to let her eyes adjust. As shapes resolved into clarity, she felt her breath catch. The main room served as both kitchen and living area. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, and although no fire burned in the September warmth, Katherine could imagine how welcome it would become winter. The kitchen area boasted a good cast iron stove, a sturdy work table, and shelves stocked with dishes and supplies. Simple furniture filled the living space. A settee that looked handmade, 2 chairs near the fireplace, a braided rug on the wooden floor. Everything was clean, meticulously ordered, and spoke of care and attention to detail. "There are 2 bedrooms," Harrison said, pointing to doors on opposite sides of the room. "I thought you would want your own space, at least at first. That one there is mine." He indicated the door to the left. "That one is yours." the door to the right. There is a washstand in each room, and I have a tub that we can fill for bathing. I usually do that outside when the weather is warm, inside by the fire when it is cold. Katherine turned to stare at him. He had given her her own bedroom. Despite the fact that they were to be married, despite his rights as her husband, he was offering her privacy, space, time. The relief that flooded through her was so intense it made her dizzy. "Thank you," she whispered. "I did not expect such consideration." Harrison met her eyes steadily. "I meant what I said before. We are partners. I will not force anything on you. We will figure this out together at whatever pace you need." Katherine felt tears threaten again and blinked them back fiercely. She would not cry in front of this man she barely knew, would not show him how close to breaking she felt. "May I see my room?" she asked, her voice not quite steady. "Of course." Harrison crossed to the right-hand door and opened it, stepping aside so she could enter. The bedroom was small but perfectly adequate. A iron-framed bed stood against one wall, made up with what looked like a new quilt in a pattern of blues and greens. A dresser sat opposite, and a small wardrobe occupied the corner. The washstand Harrison had mentioned held a ceramic pitcher and basin decorated with a simple flower pattern. A window looked out over the side yard toward the creek. "I had the quilt made in town," Harrison said from the doorway. "I am decent with woodwork but worthless with a needle. Mrs. Patterson, the shopkeeper's wife, made it. I hope the colors are all right." Katherine crossed to the bed and ran her hand over the quilt. The stitching was fine and even, the fabric soft under her fingers. No one had given her anything in months. Everything she owned had been sold to pay debts or packed into the single carpet bag that contained the ruins of her former life. This quilt, made by a stranger at Harrison's request, felt like the most precious gift she had ever received. "It is perfect," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." She heard Harrison shift his weight behind her. "I will get your bag," he said. "Take whatever time you need to settle in. I have stew from yesterday that I can heat up for supper. Nothing fancy, but it will fill the belly." Katherine listened to his footsteps retreat, then the front door open and close. Only then did she sink down onto the bed, her legs finally giving out. She pressed her hands to her face and allowed herself a few silent tears, purging just a bit of the fear and tension that had been building for days. She had made it. She was here. And somehow, impossibly, it seemed like maybe she would actually be all right. A few minutes later, Katherine heard Harrison return. She quickly wiped her face and straightened her dress, then opened the bedroom door. Harrison was setting her carpetbag just inside her room, and he stepped back immediately to give her space. "Thank you," Katherine said. "Would you like help with supper?" "You have had a long journey," Harrison said. "Why do not you rest while I heat things up? Tomorrow you can show me what kind of cook you are." He smiled slightly, and the expression transformed his face, softening the hard lines into something almost boyish. "I am functional in the kitchen, but not much more. Anything you can do will probably be an improvement." Despite everything, Katherine found herself smiling back. "I am a good cook," she said. It was one of the few domestic skills she had learned well, having spent hours in the kitchen with their cook back in Philadelphia before financial disaster struck her family. "My mother insisted I know my way around a kitchen, even though we had help. She said a woman should be able to feed herself and her family no matter what circumstances might bring." "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman," Harrison said. "She was." Katherine swallowed against the familiar ache of loss. "I miss her every day. I know that feeling." Harrison turned toward the stove. "Give me about 20 minutes and we will eat." Katherine moved to the settee and sat down, watching Harrison work. He moved with efficiency, building up the fire in the stove, pulling out a pot that must have been stored in the cold cellar, setting it to heat. He sliced bread from a loaf, thick, uneven pieces that made Katherine think he had probably baked it himself. He did not make conversation, but the silence felt comfortable rather than awkward, the natural quiet of someone comfortable in their own space. True to his word, about 20 minutes later Harrison ladled stew into 2 bowls and brought them to the small table near the kitchen area. Katherine joined him, and they sat across from each other in the lamplight, which Harrison had lit as the room grew dim. The stew was simple, beef and vegetables in a rich broth, but it was hot and filling and tasted better than anything Katherine had eaten in days. She had not realized how hungry she was until the first bite, and then she had to force herself to eat slowly, not gulp it down like a starving animal. "This is very good," she said honestly. "The secret is letting it sit overnight," Harrison said. "Everything melds together, at least that is what my mother always said." They ate in companionable silence for several minutes. Then Harrison said, "I should probably explain the situation here so you know what to expect." Katherine set down her spoon, her stomach clenching slightly. Here it came, whatever complications he had not mentioned in his letters. Harrison must have seen her tension because he said quickly, "Nothing bad. I just want you to understand how things work. The ranch keeps me busy from dawn to well after dark most days, especially now during fall roundup season. I will need to be out with the cattle much of the time. That means you will be alone here fairly often during the day. I am usually back for supper unless something goes wrong, and I am always here at night." He paused, studying her face. "I have a rifle over the fireplace and a shotgun in the barn. Have you ever handled firearms?" Katherine shook her head. "Never." "Then I will teach you. You should know how to protect yourself, and the rifle is useful for hunting as well. We get deer, antelope, sometimes elk. I try to keep us in fresh meat as much as possible." He took another bite of stew, chewed thoughtfully. "We have chickens, obviously, so you will have eggs. I keep a cow for milk and butter. The garden is mostly finished for the season, but I put up a good supply of vegetables. We go into town about once a month for supplies I cannot produce here, sometimes more often if needed." "That all sounds reasonable," Katherine said carefully. "The work is constant," Harrison continued. "I will not lie about that, but you will have time for yourself too. I do not expect you to work every waking moment. I know I said we are partners, and I mean that. You are not my employee. You are my wife, or will be once we get to town to see the preacher." He paused. "I thought we could go in a few days, give you time to settle first, if that suits you." "Yes," Katherine said, grateful for the reprieve. "A few days would be good." Harrison nodded. "We need to talk about expectations," he said, and his voice had gone serious. "I want to be clear about things so there are no misunderstandings." Katherine's heart rate picked up, but she forced herself to meet his eyes steadily. "All right. I've given you your own room because I think you need time and space to adjust to all this," Harrison said slowly, as if choosing each word with great care. "When we marry, it will be a real marriage, but we do not have to rush into all aspects of it. We can take time to get to know each other first. I want a wife I can talk to, work with, build a life with. The rest will come when we are both ready for it. Does that make sense?" Katherine felt heat rise in her cheeks, but also profound relief. "Yes," she said quietly. "That makes sense. Thank you for being direct about it." "I think we should always be direct with each other," Harrison said. "Life is too short and too hard for games or misunderstandings. If something bothers you, tell me. If you need something, tell me, and I will do the same. Can we agree on that?" "Yes," Katherine said, and realized she meant it. "I would prefer honesty, even if it is difficult." "Good." Harrison stood and collected their empty bowls. You look exhausted. Why do not you get some rest? I will clean up here. Tomorrow you can start learning your way around the place." Katherine rose as well, her body heavy with fatigue now that she had eaten. "Thank you, Harrison, for everything, for meeting me at the station, for the room, for being so understanding. I know this arrangement is strange for both of us." "It is," Harrison agreed, "but strange does not mean bad. I think we will figure it out." He glanced at her, and in the lamplight his eyes looked softer than they had at the station. "Sleep well, Katherine." "Good night," she said, and retreated to her room. Once inside with the door closed, Katherine leaned against it and released a shaky breath. She changed into her nightgown with trembling fingers, washed her face in the basin, and slipped between sheets that smelled of sunshine and soap. The bed was more comfortable than she had expected, the mattress firm but not hard. Through the wall, she could hear Harrison moving around, the quiet sounds of him banking the stove and preparing the house for night. Then his door opened and closed, and the house fell silent except for the distant sound of the creek and the occasional call of night birds. Katherine lay in the darkness, her mind spinning despite her exhaustion. In one day, her entire life had changed. This morning she had been on a train, terrified and uncertain. Now she lay in a bed in a house in Wyoming, betrothed to a man she had met only hours ago. Yet despite the strangeness of it all, despite her lingering fear and uncertainty, Katherine realized she felt something she had not felt in a very long time: hope. Harrison had been kind, patient, and honest. He had given her space and safety. Those were things she had not dared to expect. Perhaps, just perhaps, she had made the right choice after all. Sleep claimed her finally, and she dreamed of endless skies and a voice saying, "You're safe now." Katherine woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and early morning light slanting through her window. For a moment she lay disoriented, unable to place where she was. Then memory flooded back. Green River, the ranch, Harrison. She rose and dressed quickly in one of her two simple work dresses, brushed and pinned her hair, then opened her door cautiously. The main room was empty, the fire in the stove already burning, filling the house with warmth against the morning chill. Through the window, Katherine saw Harrison near the barn, carrying a bucket. She ventured outside, wrapping her arms around herself against the cool air. The sun had barely cleared the horizon, painting everything in shades of pink and gold. Harrison looked up at her approach, and something on his face might have been surprise or perhaps pleasure. "Good morning," he said. "You are up early." "So are you," Katherine replied. "The animals do not care what time I went to bed," Harrison said with a slight smile. "They want breakfast at dawn regardless. I am just finishing with the cow. I have fresh milk if you want coffee." "I can make the coffee," Katherine offered. "And breakfast, if you will tell me what you usually eat." "I usually make do with whatever is quick," Harrison admitted. "Bread and butter, maybe some eggs if I am feeling ambitious, but I would not turn down a proper breakfast if you are offering." "Consider it done," Katherine said, feeling more confident now that she had a task to focus on. "I will have something ready when you are finished with your chores." Back in the house, Katherine explored the kitchen more thoroughly. She found eggs in a basket by the door, fresh from that morning. The larder held bacon wrapped in cheesecloth, flour, cornmeal, lard, and various preserves. She stoked the stove to the right temperature and set to work. Cooking had always soothed her, the familiar rhythms and routines giving her mind something concrete to focus on. She fried bacon until it was crispy, scrambled eggs with a splash of milk, and made a quick batch of biscuits that she slid into the oven to bake. By the time Harrison returned, washing up at the basin by the back door, the table was set and breakfast was ready. Harrison stopped in the doorway, staring at the spread. "I have not had a breakfast like this since I left Missouri," he said quietly. "Sit down before it gets cold," Katherine said, hiding her pleasure at his reaction. They ate together as the day brightened around them, and Harrison told her about the ranch's daily routine. The animals that needed tending, the fences that always needed mending, the 100 small tasks that filled each day. Katherine listened, asking questions, beginning to understand the scope of the work involved. "I will show you around properly today," Harrison said as he finished his second helping of eggs. "Introduce you to the animals, show you where everything is. Tomorrow I need to ride out to check on the herd in the north pasture, but today I can spare the time." And so Katherine's first full day on the ranch began. Harrison was patient as he showed her around, explaining everything clearly. She met the milk cow, a placid creature named Daisy, and learned the basics of milking, though her attempts were clumsy and inefficient compared to Harrison's practiced skill. She gathered eggs from the chicken coop, scattering feed for the hens under Harrison's instruction. He showed her the smokehouse where meat hung curing, the root cellar where vegetables were stored against the coming winter, the workshop where he repaired tools and tack. By midday, Katherine's head was spinning with information, but she was also beginning to feel a tentative sense of possibility. This life would be hard work, but it was honest work, productive work. And she would not be dependent on anyone's charity or forced to make the terrible choices she had been facing in Philadelphia. They ate a simple lunch of bread and cheese, then Harrison said, "I thought we could ride out a bit this afternoon. I want to show you the property, give you a sense of the land." "Have you ridden before?" "Not often," Katherine admitted. "My family kept a carriage, but I rarely rode horseback." "I have a gentle mare who will treat you well," Harrison said. "Come on." In the barn, Harrison saddled 2 horses, the chestnut mare from the wagon team for Katherine and a larger bay gelding for himself. The mare did indeed prove gentle, standing patiently while Harrison helped Katherine mount and adjusted the stirrups for her shorter legs. They rode out slowly, Harrison keeping his mount close to hers, ready to help if needed. But Katherine found that after the initial nervousness, riding was not as difficult as she had feared. The mare responded to gentle guidance, and the rocking motion became almost soothing. Harrison led her through his property, pointing out landmarks, the creek that provided water year-round, the pastures where he rotated his cattle, the far boundaries of his land marked by rock cairns and natural features. The ranch covered several hundred acres, more land than Katherine could properly comprehend, all of it belonging to Harrison through hard work and careful planning. "It is not the biggest spread in the territory," Harrison said as they paused on a rise overlooking much of the property. "But it is mine, free and clear. No debts, no mortgages. Everything you see I built or earned." The pride in his voice was justified, Katherine thought. In 5 years he had created something substantial from nothing, carved out a life through sheer determination. It was impressive, and she found herself seeing him with new respect. "You should be proud," she said. "It is remarkable, truly." Harrison looked at her and his expression softened. "I am hoping we can build on it together," he said. "Make it something even better. I know you did not choose this life freely, not exactly, but I am hoping you can find contentment here, maybe even happiness." Katherine met his gaze and saw genuine hope there, mixed with uncertainty. He was as nervous about this arrangement as she was, she realized, as vulnerable in his own way. That understanding created a sudden connection between them, fragile but real. "I am hoping for the same thing," she said honestly. They rode back as the afternoon lengthened, and Katherine helped Harrison with the evening chores, learning more of the routines that structured life on the ranch. She cooked supper, Another simple meal of fried potatoes and bacon with greens from Harrison's preserved stores. They ate as the light faded and lamplight took over, talking more easily now, the conversation flowing more naturally. Harrison told her about his plans for expanding the herd, about the challenges of ranching in Wyoming's unpredictable climate. Katherine shared carefully edited stories about her life in Philadelphia, talking about her mother's love of music, her father's quiet humor, skirting around the financial disaster that had followed their deaths. That night, Katherine fell asleep more easily, her body exhausted from the day's activities, her mind more settled. The strangeness was beginning to feel less strange, more like the shape of a new life taking form. The next few days fell into a pattern. Harrison worked from dawn to dusk, and Katherine learned the rhythms of the ranch. She became more confident with the animals, more efficient with the chores. Her hands grew rough from work, her muscles sore from unaccustomed activity, but she also felt herself growing stronger. Harrison was a patient teacher and a considerate companion. He never pushed her, never demanded more than she could give. They talked during meals and in the evenings, learning about each other in gradual increments. Katherine discovered that Harrison loved reading but had few books, that he had a dry sense of humor that surfaced unexpectedly, that he was quietly generous and deeply loyal. And Harrison learned that Katherine was more resilient than her initial trembling on the train platform had suggested, that she learned quickly and did not shy from hard work, that she had a soft voice but firm opinions when she felt safe enough to share them. On the fourth day, Harrison said at breakfast, "I thought we could go into town today, see the preacher, make this official." Katherine's stomach fluttered with nerves, but she nodded. All right. They cleaned up, dressed in their best clothes, and took the wagon into Green River. The town looked less intimidating in daylight with Harrison beside her. They went first to the general store, where Harrison introduced her to Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, the couple who ran it. Mrs. Patterson, a plump woman with kind eyes, took Katherine's hands warmly. "Oh, we are so glad you arrived safely, dear. Harrison has talked of nothing else for weeks. You have made quite an impression on our quiet rancher." Katherine glanced at Harrison and saw his ears had gone red. "She exaggerates," he muttered, but Mrs. Patterson laughed. "I do not," she said firmly. "Now, you tell me if you need anything, anything at all. We women must stick together out here." The warmth in her voice made Katherine's throat tight. "Thank you," she managed. "I appreciate that." They left the store with a few supplies and continued to the small church on the edge of town. Reverend Matthews was an elderly man with gentle eyes who listened to their request and nodded approvingly. "I think you will be good for each other," he said simply. "Shall we proceed?" The ceremony was brief and simple. Mrs. Patterson and her husband served as witnesses, called over from their store. Katherine spoke her vows in a voice that only trembled slightly, and Harrison's voice was steady and sure. They exchanged simple gold bands that Harrison had purchased in advance, and then the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride," he said with a smile. Harrison looked at Katherine, a question in his eyes. She nodded, just barely, and he leaned down to press a gentle kiss to her lips. So brief and chaste it was over almost before she registered it. But the contact sent warmth spreading through her chest, and when Harrison straightened, the look in his eyes made her breath catch. They signed the marriage certificate, thanked the Reverend and the Pattersons, and headed back to the wagon. Katherine felt strange, displaced. She had entered town as Katherine Foster and was leaving as Katherine Nichols, a married woman, tied legally and morally to the man beside her. On the ride home, Harrison said quietly, "Nothing has to change. I meant what I said before. We will continue as we have been, taking our time." Katherine looked at him, this man who was now her husband, who had shown her nothing but kindness and patience. "Harrison," she said softly, "I appreciate your consideration more than I can say, but we are married now. We should not live as strangers forever." Harrison's hands tightened on the reins. "I do not want you to feel pressured." "I do not," Katherine said, surprising herself with her own certainty. "I feel safe. That is something I have not felt in a long time. You have given me that." They rode the rest of the way in charged silence, and that night when they finished supper and the last light faded from the sky, Katherine did not go to her separate room. Instead, she took Harrison's hand and let him lead her to his. What passed between them was tender and careful. Harrison's gentleness, never wavering even as his passion became evident. He made her feel cherished in a way she had never experienced, and afterward, as she lay in his arms in the darkness, Katherine felt the last of her fear finally release its grip on her heart. "Are you all right?" Harrison whispered against her hair. "Yes," Katherine said, and meant it completely. "I am more than all right." She felt him relax, his arms tightening around her. "Good," he said simply. "Sleep now. Tomorrow will come early." And it did, but Katherine woke feeling more rested than she had in months despite the short night. She woke to Harrison's warmth beside her, to the security of knowing she had a place and a purpose, to the dawning realization that she might actually be happy here. The days turned into weeks, and fall deepened into the first whispers of winter. Katherine and Harrison worked side by side, building on the understanding that had grown between them. They learned each other's habits and quirks, learned to work together with increasing efficiency, learned to read each other's moods and needs. Katherine proved herself capable beyond even Harrison's hopeful expectations. She took over the garden planning, proposing improvements for the next growing season. She learned to shoot with the rifle, becoming a decent marksman after Harrison's patient instruction. She experimented in the kitchen, creating meals that made Harrison groan with pleasure. And she handled the harder aspects of ranch life without complaint, from butchering chickens to helping Harrison when a cow had difficulty calving. Harrison, for his part, showed Katherine a tenderness she had not known men were capable of. He brought her wildflowers from the meadows when he rode in from checking the herd. He carved her a beautiful jewelry box from cedar wood, smooth and perfectly jointed. He listened when she needed to talk, held her when grief over her lost parents overwhelmed her without warning, celebrated her small triumphs as if they were major victories. And slowly, carefully, they fell in love. It was not the dramatic passion of novels. It was quieter, steadier, built on shared work and mutual respect and growing affection. It was Harrison's hand finding hers as they sat by the fire in the evenings. It was Katherine humming while she cooked because she felt content. It was the way they moved around each other in the small house, learning each other's rhythms until they danced together without thinking about it. Winter came, and with it, the hard cold that tested everything Harrison had built. But the house proved sound, the stores adequate, the animals hardy. Katherine and Harrison spent long evenings by the fire, Harrison reading aloud from one of his precious books while Katherine sewed or mended, their shoulders touching on the settee. During a fierce blizzard in January of 1883, they were snowed in for 3 days. Rather than feeling trapped, Katherine found herself treasuring the forced solitude, the way time seemed to slow and stretch, allowing them to simply be together without the constant demands of work. On the third night, with wind howling around the house and snow piling in drifts against the walls, Harrison looked up from the book he was reading and said, "I love you." Katherine's hand stilled on her sewing. She looked at him, at his serious face illuminated by firelight, and felt her heart swell almost painfully. "I love you too," she said, and knew it was true, deeply and completely true. Harrison set aside his book and pulled her into his arms, and they sat together by the fire as the storm raged outside, safe and warm and utterly content. Spring came, bringing with it the back-breaking work of calving season. Katherine worked alongside Harrison, learning more than she had ever wanted to know about bovine reproduction and the 100 things that could go wrong. She delivered her first calf alone one morning when Harrison was in the far pasture, and the rush of pride and accomplishment when the wet, gangly creature struggled to its feet made her laugh with pure joy. Harrison arrived to find her covered in mud and blood and worse, grinning like a fool. "I did it," she said triumphantly. "The cow was in trouble and I remembered what you showed me and I did it." He pulled her into his arms, apparently not caring about the mess. "I am so proud of you," he said against her hair. "You are amazing." That spring, Katherine realized she was pregnant. She told Harrison on a soft May evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, his arm around her shoulders. He went very still, then turned to look at her, his eyes wide. "Truly, truly," Katherine said, nervous about his reaction. They had never discussed children, too focused on learning to be husband and wife. Harrison's face transformed, joy spreading across it like sunrise. He touched her face gently, reverently. "A child," he breathed. "Our child." He pulled her close, careful now in a way he had not been before. "I am so happy. Are you all right with this?" "I am happy," Katherine said and realized it was true. The fear she might have felt was swamped by excitement and hope. Scared but happy. "We will figure it out together," Harrison promised, "just like everything else," and they did. Through the hot summer months as Katherine's belly swelled, through the preparations for the baby's arrival, through the terrifying and miraculous night in early February of 1884 when their son was born, red-faced and squalling, perfect in every way. They named him James, after Katherine's father, and he became the center of their world. Harrison was a devoted father, gentle with the tiny creature in a way that made Katherine fall in love with him all over again. She watched him rock their son by the firelight, singing old Missouri songs in his rough voice, and felt such overwhelming gratitude for the life they had built together. The years flowed past, marked by the unchanging rhythm of ranch life and the ever-changing growth of their family. A daughter, Sarah, arrived 2 years after James. Then another son, Michael, 2 years after that. The house expanded, Harrison adding rooms to accommodate their growing brood. The ranch prospered, the herd growing, their reputation spreading. Katherine became known in Green River as a woman of capability and kindness. She helped other ranch wives when they needed an extra hand, took meals to families when illness struck, served as midwife when the doctor could not be reached in time. She had found not just a place but a purpose, not just a husband but a true partner. And Harrison, watching his wife laugh as their children played in the yard, remembering the terrified woman who had stepped off the train all those years ago, knew himself to be the luckiest man alive. On a warm September evening in 1895, 13 years after Katherine's arrival, the family gathered on the expanded porch after supper. James, now 11, was practicing with the rope Harrison had given him, determined to master the art of lasso throwing. Sarah, 9, sat with a book, her dark hair falling forward as she read with intense concentration. Michael, 7, chased the barn cat around the yard, his laughter ringing out across the prairie. Katherine sat in the rocking chair Harrison had made for her when she was pregnant with James, watching her children with a contentment that still sometimes surprised her with its intensity. Harrison emerged from the barn and crossed the yard, pausing to ruffle Michael's hair before climbing the porch steps. He settled into the chair beside Catherine's, reaching for her hand. His fingers laced through hers with the ease of long familiarity, his thumb tracing patterns on her skin. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly, a question he had asked before over the years, always seeking reassurance. Katherine turned to look at him, at the gray threading through his hair now, the deeper lines around his eyes, the face that had become more precious to her than her own. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment." It was true. The terror she had felt stepping off that train seemed like it had happened to a different person, someone younger and less certain. The woman she had become, shaped by this land and this life and this man, would not trade any of it for the world she had left behind. "I love you," Harrison said, as he said every day, never taking for granted the gift they had been given. "I love you too," Katherine replied, the words as fresh and true as the first time she had spoken them. As the sun set over the Wyoming prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the Nichols family sat together in perfect peace. The children's laughter, the distant lowing of cattle, the evening song of birds all blended into a symphony of home. Katherine thought back to that September day in 1882, to her trembling fear and desperate hope. She thought of Harrison's first words to her, "You're safe now." He had kept that promise every single day since. But more than that, he had given her love, partnership, and a life richer than anything she had dared to dream. And as the last light faded and the first stars appeared, Katherine Foster Nichols, former mail-order bride, successful rancher's wife, devoted mother, knew herself to be completely and utterly happy. The ranch would continue to prosper, the children would grow and eventually start families of their own, and Katherine and Harrison would face together whatever challenges the years ahead might bring. But that evening, in that perfect moment of contentment, the future did not matter. Only the present, only the love they had built, only the promise kept. The Wild West could be harsh and unforgiving, but it could also be beautiful and full of possibility. Katherine had learned that truth in the years since she had stepped off that train, trembling and afraid. Harrison had promised her safety, but he had given her so much more. He had given her home and love and a life beyond measure, and that was everything.